everybody. Welcome back to the show. This episode is brought to you by The Wellness Paradigm, a holistic health coaching company shifting the way that women understand and heal their bodies. Through bioenergetic testing, functional lab testing, and functional nutrition, we uncover what traditional approaches often overlook, so you can stop guessing, start healing, and finally feel like yourself again. No more one-size-fits-all protocols, just real answers, deep-rooted healing, and the clarity and confidence you deserve to feel incredible. It's time to shift the paradigm of women's health. Now on to the show. And good morning on my side of the world. Good evening to you, Jenelle.
Good evening, good morning.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think I think this is one that a lot of people are going to resonate with that doesn't really get talked about enough around, nervous system work, around relationships, maybe talking about some hard things that people try to maybe avoid in their life or don't realize are causing problems. But Jenelle does somatic therapy for anxious and or avoidant attachment styles, and she really helps women heal their relationship patterns with energetics and emotional blocks and, really cool, amazing tools. So I'm excited to dive in. I'm just going to give the mic to you and tell us a little bit more about, what we do into getting into this line of work.
Thank you. Well, through a series of unfortunate events, I just once upon a time lived a life where I struggled kind of in all directions, but specifically, a lot of self-worth problems, low self-respect, really afraid of, speaking up for myself, setting boundaries, saying no, asking for help, all these things. And a lot of very dysfunctional relationships. So in that, I hit a rock bottom of sorts. And that kind of catapulted me into seeking a new life. And through a few years, I moved cities and began diving into all of this healing work. And it was there that I found a women's group. And that was back in, I think, like 2016 or something like that. And that was like one of the first places in the world that I actually felt like I could really let myself like be seen, and not just for like the comfortable parts or like the whatever, like really talk about things that had happened in my life and things that were happening within me. And what I really appreciated about this group was it was ushering me to be incredibly honest with myself and to get really clear on who I actually was, what I actually wanted. And I think learning a lot about relationship too, just through that, through the other women, through learning some concepts, some tools, and then really realizing that, my relationship to myself, first and foremost, is this like foundation of how I relate to literally everything and everyone around me. And so it was just pretty mind-blowing work. And then through that, I stepped in as a facilitator and I trained with them. Some people might be familiar with it. It's a Rising Woman, which is a online platform. They're kind of known for relationship work, but I worked with them for quite a while and then kind of branched off and just started offering my own groups online and one-to-one work, and then did a whole series of trainings and things I won't get into, but that's kind of a little bit of the backstory.
Nice. So, you primarily work with this anxious or avoidant attachment styles. Now, some people are familiar with this, some people aren't. Can you give us a little description on maybe somebody that is in this box but not really aware of it?
Yes. So if you're not aware, anxious attachment, I'll just start on that side, is this kind of tendency in relationship where you are incredibly consumed in your mind with the relationship or with like a love interest. So it takes up a lot of your mental real estate. And from a nervous system level, which is something that I also focus on to really understand this, not just from like our conscious awareness, but what's really happening beneath the surface, your nervous system becomes almost reliant on getting a sense of connection outside of yourself in order to feel safe. So that's where, for example, if you're dating somebody and they're taking a while to text you back, there can be this rush of anxious energy and worry, and your all your thoughts can go toward what's happening? Do they like me? Why haven't they texted me back? Did I say the wrong thing? And it's like it hijacks you and it takes over. And this can, of course, happen in relationship too. If your partner's away on a trip or they seem distant, you can get really wrapped up in fear. Are they mad at me? Is it because of this? And then all of these problematic behaviors can kind of stem from that deeply anxious, kind of insecure feeling place. And for anyone who's had anxiety, they know that it's not just like you don't feel like you're in conscious control. You don't feel like you're calling those shots. Like it really feels like something takes over. And some people can have this experience where they almost feel like they're like, I can see that I'm acting in a way that I don't want to act, but I can't help it and I can't stop it. So that's kind of where the nervous system comes in. And then just to quickly touch on avoidant is kind of the other side of this. And I won't go into all of the development as to why these things happen. But basically, they feel more safe in self-reliance, and connection itself can almost feel it can feel uncomfortable or anxiety provoking. So there can be a tendency to lean out to self-resource, to like disconnect from other in order to feel safe. And the last thing I'll say on that is like the fundamental root of avoidance, the fear, is I'm afraid to lose myself. And the fundamental root of anxious attachment is I'm afraid to lose the other. So there's these deep fears that kind of work in opposition almost, that keeps the anxious person chasing and then the avoidant pulling away. And of course, there can be some flipping back and forth and a bit of a dance, if you will. But those are kind of those two almost ends of the spectrum that people can find themselves in. And you might find that you kind of switch depending on what's going on.
Yeah. And so how does this really show up in relationships, and when people come to you, are they aware of these patterns, or how are you helping them kind of bring awareness and, well, I will say and or shift, but that's probably a whole nother topic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of people who do find me have an awareness of these things. Typically, the people who find me are like, I've been doing the therapy for a long time and I know why I am the way I am. And they've like done all the psychoanalysis, but they're like, I still can't seem to change it. I still get taken over. I still react in a way I don't want to react. A lot of people might be aware of, I have some triggers where I end up doing some things and saying some things I don't feel so good about, but I can't help it. And so that's usually at the point where somebody will come and work with me. Or, somebody might be single and they go, I just have this long pattern of this thing keeps showing up and I don't want that anymore. And I'm really ready for like a healthy, stable relationship. What do I need to kind of like adjust within myself in order to be ready for that? So yeah. And of course, it's not just the one individual. Usually people will come to me wanting to work on what is most prevalent for them. But of course, the dynamic of who they're either in relationship with or dating will impact that. So there's other tools that can come in there too.
Does that get tricky if it's like they're doing the work, but the other partner isn't? And, you know, there's only so much you can do to, be in alignment. I feel like so often so many more women, but men too, but they're changing, they're growing, they're shifting, and their partners stay stagnant, and it creates this like disconnect.
Yeah.
Do you see that a lot?
Yes. Yes, definitely. I usually like to ask when I am working with a individual who's in relationship, I will ask, is your partner willing to like do some things, try some practices? And so there will be things that I will share. Some of the cases, it's a yes. Yeah, my partner wants to work on these things too, and open to practices we could do together. How they could be an ally for each other in healing, because it really helps when you have a partner who like understands your triggers and understands these things. It makes that dance so much easier. And sometimes the person might feel like this is really just my thing that I want to work on, and I really want to hone in on that. And to that, I'll say, sure, let's work on your side of the dynamic. And sometimes what you'll find is that from one partner, like you could imagine it kind of as a dance, because people get into like roles with each other and they just kind of start doing the same things. Like the conflict's the same, the intimacy is the same, everything starts being same. So if one partner kind of says, okay, I'm all of a sudden I'm going to stop doing the waltz and I'm going to start tangoing. Their other partner usually will kind of be like, oh, now I got to like rework my footing and hopefully meet them in some degree of a new kind of dynamic. But of course, it's not always that simple, and there could be very real issues and blocks that do need to be addressed by the other person. So it can be kind of arranged depending on what's going on.
Yeah. You mentioned talk therapy too, and this is a really common one with a lot of people that talk about more somatic work and how talk therapy, it can be incredibly helpful for some people, but for a lot of people, it just kind of reloops maybe old trauma patterns or just kind of, they're just kind of hashing things out, but not really moving through. Where do you see the biggest difference with the work that you do or adding in more of this somatic type work versus talk therapy?
Yeah, I like that you brought up the rehashing because something, in studying the nervous system, something that I've learned is that the way our body kind of processes information is like a bit different from our really readily available like conscious mind and thought. So when we just keep telling that same story over and over, on some level our body kind of just feels like it just keeps happening, right? And we hold on to those body memories and we react from that place. So let's say somebody has a trigger and it's around something that maybe happens in their relationship. Their partner does something and it creates a really overwhelming reaction for them. That might be disproportionate to what's going on because that person is all of a sudden getting flooded, right? They're overwhelmed by something their partner's doing. And it's because it reminds them of something in the past where there's still some hurt. There's a fear response. And so their body takes over and they do what they know best, which is, let's say in this example, to fight. So a big conflict breaks out. Maybe this person gets really defensive. Maybe they yell. And maybe that's how they learned to protect themselves at an early age. So in talk therapy, we could sit down and go, okay, yeah, you had to yell when you were a kid because this thing would happen. And that's the only way you stayed safe. But like beyond that, it doesn't really tackle that part of your body that's like I'm actually just going to go ahead and do this thing, even though I don't want to be yelling at my partner. I don't want to go 0 to 100. So in somatic work, what we would really be doing is, working toward getting to that trigger and bringing it to mind and then using different practices to basically start in a very slow and subtle way, almost like poking at that trigger and bringing those feelings up. But instead of just following that very well-worn pathway that goes 0 to 100, big reaction, we actually slow everything down. And then we switch from less activation. So less of this like big reactive energy. I help, people shift towards something that is calm and settling until their nervous system is demonstrating signs that they've actually come out of that trigger. And then we can go back into that trigger slowly. And we kind of do this process of going in a little bit and then out, and then in a little bit and out. And what's really cool about that is that we're like layering a new experience onto that trigger. So where your body knows 0 to 100, and that's all it's known, and that's all it's ever practiced, and it doesn't know anything else, we practice 0 to 5 and then come out. And then we could go maybe a little bit more. And this process is called memory reconsolidation. And it's how we hold and store things in our mind. And when we do that process of like back and forth between stress, calm, it teaches your body that you don't actually need to go to 100. You don't need to go to that big reactionary space. And over time, basically, what that person will experience is that organically they no longer get as triggered about that thing, for example, which is what's really cool about it. Like I know that I'm doing my job when a client comes to me and says, you know what, I was going about my day and then I just realized that thing actually happened earlier and I didn't even react. I didn't even know it happened. I didn't get angry or I didn't get anxious or I didn't get this. And they're like, whoa, that was interesting. And that's like a sign where I know, okay, I'm finding the right path for this person to support them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like that's a different concept than people have ever been kind of exposed to or aware of, and maybe uncomfortable as well. Especially if somebody's gotten a little complacent with just like talking about things, being like, I know, I know how to do this, but not actually changing it in their body. Now, when you say in your body, some people are not familiar with what somatic work really is or what it means
Mhm.
to feel things in your body and or move things through your body. Can you explain a little more on why that's important and how you've seen the biggest shift with clients embodying this?
Mhm. Yeah, so a way I like to explain it, if you haven't heard of somatics or that's not fully registering, is everyone knows the feeling of being like really anxious or like somebody startles you and you have an unexpected like shock and your heart rate comes up really intensely. Or maybe you're feeling really sad and you have that like lump in your throat. Or something happens and you feel like anxious. There's a pressure in your chest. Maybe you feel a bit nervous about something, you feel like something's dropping in your tummy. So we all know what that feels like. Like if you're a human with a body, you know what it feels like. But it's usually that we don't notice any of those things until the dial is at almost level 10. It gets so loud. So what somatic work is in a simple way is, well, part of it is getting attuned to those subtle degrees. What's actually happening a little bit beneath the surface. That's not a level 10. That's because that's happening all the time in your body. So like right now, as you listen, your body is in a certain physiological state and might not be aware of it because you're thinking as you hear this podcast. You're not feeling as much. So when you grow your ability to pay attention to your body, why that's so important is that it gives you more, well, conscious awareness of what you need. And it allows you to be more, again, conscious of what you're doing. You don't just get pulled into reactions as much. You'll know when you start getting a little bit anxious before you get to that level 10, where you just feel like you're in a tornado and you can't think logically. And that's where we start kind of making not the best choices for ourselves. We get really stuck in fear. So you can kind of perceive more subtle versions of your body communicating to you. And instead of getting pulled into a storm, you can come out and really learn how to come down. And not to mention just being in a parasympathetic, like being in that rest state. So that's not the fight or flight, right? That's where we connect with people. That's where we learn. That's when we can rest. That's when our body can heal and relax. There's less like cortisol firing. There's more basically ability to heal and also connect, and to be intimate, not necessarily just sexual. I mean just like really going deep into connection with other people. So a lot of people unfortunately are kind of unknowingly living in chronic stress or chronic fight or flight and don't realize the effects of that. So to just quickly answer your last question on like what are the main effects, I think a lot of people that I work with don't realize how much they're in that state of anxiety and stress and how deeply it's impacting every element of their life, from not just their romantic relationship, but their choices, their friendships, their thoughts, everything. And then when they start tasting and touching into that feeling of dropping down and actually feeling what it is to feel safe, they're like, whoa, where have I been? Where did I go? And then they're like, I need to find my way back to this place. And then they start having that new baseline. And that's like pretty crazy, the impacts from that.
Yeah, that's a big one. Big one with our clients too, right? It's like you can't fully heal if your body's stressed out all the time. And, a big one we hear all the time is, but I'm not stressed, right? And it's like, but our body's just gotten so used to that as a survival mechanism, and meanwhile I'm like, oh, well, your symptoms and your labs and everything's telling a little bit different story. And, your mind's just on a different caliber because it's been trying to keep you safe, right? And so it's really
Yeah.
interesting to hear it also from a relationship standpoint, right? Now, if somebody was maybe not ready to dive into fully working, maybe one-on-one, but wants to, know that there's something more for them. Maybe they've done the therapy, maybe they just, want to deepen their relationship. Like, what would be one or two things you would tell them to just gently guide them into getting started?
Yeah, I would say the like base level of somatic work when I start working with somebody and I can just, kind of start there to give some tools or some practices is really simple. When I'm working with somebody at first, I want to see, do they have access to the that parasympathetic? Do they have access to coming down? And the only way that somebody's going to be able to do that, because some people don't actually, again, they think that they're fine, but they're really stressed and you can see through their body language, is for them to really understand the cues of their body simply. I'm aware of things like my heart rate. I'm aware of if my shoulders are actually perked up. A lot of people are kind of walking around with like their muscles clenched and they don't even notice it. So the first step for anyone would be scanning through your body and really getting attuned to what's happening at that level. And you can look for your heart rate. You can look for your muscular tension. You can notice if your breath is moving deep in your belly. That's like more of a regulated or like a parasympathetic state, or is it a little bit shallow and in the chest? Am I having really urgent racing thoughts? Like if I were to try to sit still and just feel my body in space, would that feel really challenging? Um, yeah. And is there just a general felt sense of like urgency, fast, or is it slow? So I would just really recommend that people start with a base of scanning through and trying to perceive those subtle cues and really just practice that for a while. And that's going to give you the right foundation, because even if you still might need support coming down from those really activated states, at least you're going to know the cue and be able to sense what's happening in your body at a physiological level. And then from there, you're going to have more skills ready for when somebody, if you do end up working with somebody, helps you kind of come down. And if in relationship, if you have a particular trigger, a fear, a pattern, something that comes up, I would really recommend that you pause in those moments and try to see what's happening at that physiological level when either anxiety or that avoidance is really online. Like what's happening in your body when you're triggered or anxious or worried or making assumptions or so on and so forth.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. Now, if somebody was ready to get started and they wanted to kind of explore this deeper, where can they find a little bit more about what you do and your work and yeah, getting connected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have an Instagram where I'm kind of sharing writing and things like that. So that's the best place to connect with me. And there is some more info about my work on there. And then I also have a podcast as well. It's called Creating Conscious Relationships. And on there I share lots of tools as well. So if you just want to like learn some practices, there's a pretty big library there of different episodes. So that's where you could learn a little bit more. And if you wanted to say hi, you can message me on my Instagram, which is at Jenelle Annette. Hard to spell, but I'm sure we'll be in the show notes.
Yeah. Yes, I'll,
Mhm.
I'll put your Instagram and the link to your podcast down in the show notes. And I want to thank you for being here and sharing all your wisdom with us. And if you guys listening want to connect deeper with her, definitely shoot her a DM or shoot me a DM saying that this was helpful. I always love to hear feedback from you guys as well. But thank you, Janelle, for being here. Thank you, listeners, for being here. And we'll catch you on the next show.
Yeah. Thank you, Shannon.